Hey, it's Zane here and welcome back. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks again for tuning in, and please remember to give the video a like. It's a free and easy way to support the channel. Now today I want to talk about banking, and I want to answer the question, can banks fail? And I also want to tie into this conversation how Bitcoin enables you and I to be our own bank. And I guess this is a property or a feature or a benefit of Bitcoin that isn't spoken about enough, and I think it's probably one of the most important benefits when you consider recent history and everything that's going on in the world right now, geopolitically, globally. And so I think it's really important for us to talk about banking, because at the end of the day, it's something that most people take for granted, that their money is always going to be there when they need it. And so, but we've seen in recent times that crises can and do happen. And I think this is a really important red flag for us to be very conscious of when it comes to thinking about our personal situations and how Bitcoin ties into this and enables us to be the custodians of our own money. So let's talk about banking for a moment. Firstly, in Australia, we have what is considered a very robust banking system on a global scale. It is highly regulated. We have what's known as four main pillar banks, which are Westpac, ANZ, National Australia Bank, and Commonwealth Bank. And it has long been regarded that these banks are really the lifeblood of the Australian banking industry. And we've seen over many years that the entire system essentially is built around these four main banks. Yes, we have some independent banks, some building societies, but the whole banking system in Australia is backed by the Reserve Bank of Australia, which essentially is the lender of last resort. And so banks in this country are able to essentially loan out as much as they like. They're not required to hold any specific reserves. This is known as fractional reserve banking, when we have our deposits going into a bank, but then banks are allowed to loan out essentially unlimited with no regard to the amount of deposit reserves that they actually have. And so this creates potential risks in the future, because if you and I and all of our relatives and everybody that we know gets nervous about the banking system, or there's another pandemic, or there's some geopolitical conflict that potentially could affect us, and we get nervous, the first thing that would be inclined to do is to go down to the bank and try and withdraw some cash, to withdraw our money. But in that situation, banks don't have our deposits. They don't have the amount of reserves there to be able to facilitate mass withdrawals. And so we're basically operating on a system of pure confidence. We go through life, day-to-day living, just believing that our deposits will always be there no matter what, and that if something breaks, if something fails, the government will come in and basically protect our deposits and everything will be okay. Now, the reality is that in Australia, those deposits are only protected up to $250,000. And it's a scheme known as the FCS, the Financial Claims Scheme. And so, anybody who has up to 250K in the bank, yes, the governments can come to the party in a time of crisis and essentially guarantee their deposits. The question becomes, though, what happens if you have more than that? And I know many people who have significantly more than that, and they know intuitively that it's a risk to hold significant amounts of cash in the bank. So if you've got several $1 million, would you feel safer actually having your cash sitting in a bank account, in an interest-bearing account, or would you feel safer having it parked in a bricks and mortar piece of real estate that you can see and touch and have the title deed to your name attached to that? And most people know that their guarantees or their bank deposits are only guaranteed up to this 250K. such that if they've got significantly more than that, they're looking to essentially protect themselves by parking that capital in a piece of real estate, even if it's sitting there vacant. And so it's really important to keep this in mind, and I'm going to explain how this ties back into Bitcoin in a moment. But we've seen globally that banks can and do fail. In 2023, we saw Silicon Valley Bank, we saw First Republic Bank, we saw Signature Bank in the US. They all failed due to bank runs. People were getting nervous about the excessive lending that these banks were, a part of, and they went to withdraw their money, and essentially the banks closed the doors, and there was some amalgamations that took place. But essentially, what happened is the Fed came in and bailed these depositors out. And the same thing happened with Credit Suisse, and we saw in 2019 we saw the Lebanese banking crisis, where people lost their life savings, people committed suicide, everything that they'd worked for that was in a bank. The banks basically seized their deposits. And if you listen to somebody like Tony Yazbek from the Bitcoin Way, he was co-founder of the Bitcoin Way, he explains how he was caught up in the Lebanese banking crisis of 2019, and how it totally changed his whole perspective on the financial system and on banking, and basically inspired him to start the Bitcoin Way and educating people on self-sovereignty and being the custodians of their own money and being their own bank. And so if you haven't listened to Tony speak, I'd highly encourage you to tune into one of his interviews. Just look him up on YouTube. He's been on all the major Bitcoin podcasts. Tony Yazbek, Yazbeck. And if that doesn't shift your perspective on global banking and why you should protect yourself, then I can't help you. I don't believe that anything can help you. So we know it can happen. It happened in Cyprus in 2013. We know that there's so much debt in the system. We know that there's 1 million plus households in Australia who are sitting on what's known as the mortgage cliff, several months behind on their mortgage payments. If this system was to collapse, you have to ask yourself, what would that mean to our deposits? Are banks secure enough to be able to guarantee that our money would be there? And certainly in the environment that we're in these days, since 2020, I'm not prepared to take that risk. I guess you would only need to ask some of the participants of the Canadian trucker convoy how they feel about the banking system, seeing their GoFundMe accounts frozen, seeing their bank accounts essentially frozen. How would you feel if that happened to you? If all of a sudden there was a directive that said that we don't like what you're saying or sharing or doing or protesting, and so now we're going to take your money. So we know these things can happen. Anybody who refuses to believe they can happen, I guess they do that at their own peril. And I think we're in a world now where we have to be thinking very much that these things can and do happen, and we have to understand that Bitcoin is a solution because it enables us to actually be our own bank in a self-sovereign way. So how does Bitcoin play into this? Firstly, it enables us to be in full control of our funds. We are able to be in full control of our money with no counterparty involvement whatsoever. That's the promise of Bitcoin. And when you secure your Bitcoin in cold storage, private custody, that is essentially what has then happened. You are now officially your own bank. There is no counterparty risk now associated with you being able to access your funds. And so that's a really, really powerful attribute of Bitcoin that I like to share from the rooftops, because it's not spoken about enough unless people are kind of hardcore Bitcoiners and are really deep down the rabbit hole. Everybody wants to talk about the number go up technology. What's the price of Bitcoin going to be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? And whilst that is all interesting and exciting and definitely is all going to happen, we have to be also dialed into the self-sovereignty aspect of Bitcoin, which for me, in the world that we're in right now, is one of the most important profile or properties of Bitcoin. So you're in full control. You hold the keys to your Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is stored on the blockchain, but you are able to essentially hold the keys to the safe that opens that value, that Bitcoin that belongs to your private key address. And you're able to send that value peer-to-peer at any time, anywhere in the world, without the requirement of permission from any other party, any other entity whatsoever. So no one can block, seize, or confiscate your Bitcoin. Once you secure it in the right way, you are the custodian of your wealth. You're in full control of your wealth, and that cannot be said for any other asset that I'm aware of, other than, of course, gold, silver, and cash. But we know that there's a whole other conversation around gold and silver and the verifiability of those metals, the fact that they're not that portable, easy to confiscate, and not only that, when you consider the growth rate of these precious metals over the last 10 years as compared to Bitcoin, logic tells you that Bitcoin is a better asset to be in, even though I do believe that we all should have some allocation to precious metals, gold and silver, as an Armageddon play. So there's that. You're in full control. Number two is there's no middlemen. Like I said, there's no person in the middle, nobody to quarantine that transaction. It's peer-to-peer. You and I are able to transact and transfer value with one another with no intermediary required. So when you consider the banking system, in a worst case scenario, could you access your account? Could you withdraw funds if you needed to? Could you transfer value to wherever you needed that value to go if there was capital controls, if there was a directive where banks were even temporarily able to halt the movement of funds in your account? So that's really important to keep in mind, because Bitcoin solves that problem. Number three is it's censorship resistant. Now, you have to understand that Bitcoin is decentralized, which basically means there is no CEO, there's no entity controlling Bitcoin. It has its own life force. It is driven by thousands of nodes around the world that all act together to authenticate and verify and secure the network, and to keep it decentralized, and to keep it secure, and to keep it every transaction immutable and final and verifiable. And again, this is another really important property of Bitcoin we have to keep coming back to, and that is the decentralization is a really, really potent feature of Bitcoin that means it is censorship resistant, which means that the Canadian truckers, had they had their money stored in Bitcoin rather than their bank account, they wouldn't have had a problem. They would have been able to continue to do what they were doing. So I think that's a really important thing. We know Bitcoin basically means that we're at non-risk of bank failures, because we now are the custodians of our money, and we're out of that entire system. So we are essentially our own bank, separate, autonomous, and we're sitting on a life raft where we just have that peer-to-peer ability to transfer value to whoever we need in order to transact with. And then the final thing is that we have to understand that Bitcoin has a global liquidity pool. It trades 24/7. It is the most liquid asset on Earth. This is one of the reasons why it remains one of the most volatile when you price it in dollars, because it is the most liquid asset on Earth. And so, an asset that trades 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is always going to be very responsive to any sentiment in the marketplace. And so it's really important for us to keep that in mind. I don't see volatility as risk. Risk and volatility are two very different things. Just because something is volatile doesn't mean that it's risky. So for me, when I think of Bitcoin and I zoom out and I look at the profile of Bitcoin, the fact that it's decentralized, the fact that it's deflationary, the fact that it's fixed supply, and the fact that it is secured by consensus to make it even more decentralized as time goes on, I'm not really worried too much about the price. I can see that over the course of time, the trajectory of Bitcoin is up and to the right forever, even though there may be slight pullbacks along the way. So I'm not worried about what the price is tomorrow, next week, or next year. I know that long term the value of it is going to be significant based on its scarcity, its digital scarcity. And because we have access to global liquidity, it basically means that at any time, if we need to convert some Bitcoin to fiat currency, you can do that within seconds, if not minutes. If you're hooked up to Lightning or the Liquid network or side chain, you can essentially convert your Bitcoin into spendable currency pretty much within minutes. So the global liquidity pool of Bitcoin is one of the most powerful things to keep in mind, because if you need to move a substantial portfolio of assets in a hurry, how are you going to do that when it takes on average 60 to 90 days to move a piece of real estate? If you need to divest a substantial portfolio of stocks or shares, that's something you have to do through an institution or a financial planner or through your broker, then have to get those sold and into your bank account, and then of course you're kind of still stuck in the system because the money is now sitting in your bank account, which is what we're trying to avoid. So I'm going to leave it there today. A little bit of a ramble, but I really wanted to highlight the fact that banks can and will and do fail. They have done so even in recent history. I don't believe that any bank in the world is perfectly safe, even though Australia has one of the most robust banking systems in the world. Just remember that the financial claims scheme only insures your deposits up to $250,000. And so if you have significantly less than that, you're probably not worried. But even for all of the other benefits that I've explained, you should be considering Bitcoin as an opportunity for you to park some of your long-term savings as a hedge against the banking system, so that you are even in part your own bank. So keep that in mind. Hope you got some value today. Hope you got some insight. Please let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. And please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. This is Zane signing out. Have a great day. Bye for now.